If you've ever wondered what the differences are between the men's and women's college game, we're gonna break it down in this video. Some of you might find out that the games are more alike than you thought, and some of you might be surprised at how different they are. But regardless of why you're here, this should be fun. Not a lot of people break down film like this, but I think it would be good for you to have a reference point of what makes these games similar and different. So for the men's game, we're gonna use the best rivalry in basketball, UNC versus Duke, both teams in the top 10, and both teams having elite level forwards who went head to head the entire game. And in a similar matchup on the women's side, you've got the undefeated South Carolina Gamecocks, #1 in the country versus #9 defending champs LSU. Both teams with stud forwards as well. But before we get into the comparisons, let me tell you about the sponsor for this video. Coaches, if you're looking for a new customizable board, then Hoops King is the place for you. Their website is easy to navigate and you can customize your board down to the most personal details. And having a two-sided feature will allow you to keep track of everything that you need to come game time. And you can select your line options. So whether you're in high school, college, or the NBA, there's a board just for you, which is one of the reasons the Los Angeles Lakers purchased their boards from Hoops King. And I can personally guarantee you that the logo that you customize on the website will look exactly the same way in person, if not better. And they guarantee swift delivery, so you'll have your new board within 10 days of ordering. The link to their website is in the description, or just type in hoopsking.com. The first place I want to start is how both teams play through the post because of who they have on their team. South Carolina's Camila Cardoso is 6'7", and they feed her the ball all game long. And if you watched any basketball last year, you know the name Angel Reese, and that's who LSU plays through as well. So both of these teams are always trying to get the ball into the paint as much as possible. And in the men's game, it's a very similar situation. UNC has their returning All-American Armando Bacot, and they play through the post. He gets post feeds throughout the entire game, and most of their offense is going to run through him. And Duke has a similar makeup. Their preseason Player of the Year candidate, Kyle Flip Filipowski, is who Duke runs their offense through. So the first difference that you'll see in these two games is how they guard in the post. When it comes to the women's game, they throw the ball into the post as many possessions as they possibly can, and what you'll notice is there's a lot of deep post seals. So girls are catching the ball almost with a foot or two inside the paint most of the time, and the other interesting thing is you see very few post fires or double teams. And because of those two things, you see very easy buckets right at the rim from both teams. And that makes sense because you have this huge height advantage, and now you're getting great position on every catch, which makes it easy to score. And even in situations where they would come and double team or post fire, a lot of times these catches are so deep into the paint that it's too late and girls are still scoring. And in the men's game, it couldn't be more different. Almost every catch that Armando Bacot had in the post, they would double team or post fire to make sure that he couldn't score it one-on-one. They didn't even want him getting it in the paint. They constantly would dig and fire to force him to kick it out, and then they would have to make plays on the perimeter. And you'll see this over and over in these possessions, that on every touch there was somebody coming from Duke to try and double team to force him to kick it out. And instead of UNC trying to just fight their way through it, they would accept the double team, kick it out, and then play from there. Two very different strategies in both of these games when you know that the ball is going into the post. But definitely the biggest difference in the two games is where the ball is being thrown in at. Armando caught this ball way outside of the paint almost all night, whereas in the women's game, a lot of those catches were in the charge circle. The next difference that you see in these two games is ball screen coverage. So what you noticed from both teams in the women's game is that they went under almost every ball screen that was set the entire night, where they'll slip underneath the screen and meet the ball handler on the other side of the screen like you're watching right here. And the men's game was the exact opposite. On almost every screen set by either team, the on-ball defender would fight to get over the top of the screen, and then the big would either be in drop coverage or some type of a low show. Now, I can tell you definitively the reason for that is because in the women's game, at least this one specifically, this shot right here, which is sometimes referred to as loading the gun, is the shot that both teams were willing to give up. they go under every one of these ball screens with the understanding that if they come off it and shoot it, they'll live with the results of that shot. And this is a difference between the men's and the women's game. This is just not a shot that most women's teams that I've seen are going to live and die by, because out of all those shots, this was the only one that was hit during the game. The contrast is that in the men's game, the one time that somebody went underneath the screen, they got hit with a 3. And that's why in this game and most men's games, you're going to see the on-ball defender go over the top of most screens. If the guy is a threat at all to shoot the 3, they're going to live with them getting downhill, having to shoot shots like floaters and different things over the top of the big who's in drop coverage, or live with coming off and shooting mid-range jump shots like you see right here. And I would love to know if there's statistical evidence that men take and make more of these shots than women in the first place. The other coverage that was used in this game is ice coverage. That's where the on-ball defender is going to jump to the inside to take away that middle drive, force the ball handler baseline into the big, and they basically have the same drop coverage, but they're not letting the guard get to the middle of the floor. Now you have to keep in mind that this is just one sample of a men's and women's game, but it's definitely clear that their strategy in guarding ball screens were very different. Now the next area where you see a big contrast is in transition. In the men's game, you can tell that the goal was always to get to the rim every possession if you could. And I can't speak for every men's college basketball team, but as a college coach myself for over 10 years, I can tell you that the strategy that I have seen for the entire time I've been coaching is in transition, we either want to get a layup or a dunk, or we want to get a catch and shoot 3. The mid-range game isn't really the goal in transition. That seems like settling when you can get all the way to the basket, even if that means putting pressure on the rim and getting to the free throw line. And that's what you continue to see in this game, is guys were hunting layups in transition, even if it meant that there was going to be heavy collisions because they wanted to get to the rim. The contrast that I saw in the women's game is that they were perfectly fine taking mid-range jump shots. You saw it from both teams in transition, from two teams that play pretty fast, that they would come down, get right to that free throw line, and if there was somebody at the rim, they were just going to pull up and try and hit that mid-range jump shot. But these two possessions I thought were significant. You'll notice that in this transition situation, the ball is thrown ahead, and this defender is in position where she could make a play on this ball and either try and steal it or go block it. And I thought it was interesting that she pulled up, because in the same situation in a men's game, you very rarely see the defender not take the opportunity to try and go up and block that shot. And the reason I think that that happens is because of the way that the game is officiated differently. Whether you like it or not, if you watch the men's and women's game, in the women's game, the refs are much quicker to call contact fouls where there's any type of collision between one team and the other. There you just saw an offensive foul, and here you see almost the exact same contact, and it's almost always a play on, and they don't call much. You'll see on this drive that because there's a considerable amount of contact, they're going to call that a blocking foul. But in the men's game, when you have almost the exact same contact, again, it's probably going to be a play on. And I am not saying that this is right or wrong, and I do not want for the comments in this video to get disrespectful and chippy. I'm just pointing out that there's definitely a difference in this aspect of the men's and women's game, and I actually think that that's what leads to seeing two very different brands of basketball. And the last area where I saw a huge difference in the game was the size advantage. In the women's game, what you'll notice is on rebounds, even if there's 8 players in the area to get the rebound, the advantage goes to the biggest players. And you can see this statistically. On both teams, the 3 best rebounders are the 3 tallest girls in their rotation. And I think that's just a huge advantage in the women's game, and it's why on all of these premier programs you see dominating forwards on almost every team. But what's crazy is in the men's game, the height isn't as significant. Here you've got 6'9", 6'10", 6'11", and it's the 6'3" guy that's out jumping everybody to grab boards. Or you have a situation where you get this box out with a 6'3" versus 6'11" guy, and it's the guard who comes up with the basketball. The game has grown and developed so much for men's and women's basketball, and I hope you were able to see some things that you didn't know about. Thanks for coming through. We'll see you next time in the film room.